Hi everyone, this is Koinzell here, and I'm pleased to say that the Tighnari Math Guide 1 is ready. This is Tighnari stats. As you can see, he has elemental damage ascension for his ascension stat. This is the signature weapon Hunter's Path. I'll quickly go through this before we talk about what's next in the video. Okay, so the thing obvious as an intro, including his weapon. So his weapon is actually one very similar to PJC, where the CR is 44.1. And given that his kit requires him to have EM as well, I guess it's okay for him over base attack. R1 you get 12% all elemental damage bonus, and you get a tireless hunt effect when you are hitting an opponent with charge attack. What this does is that it increases charge attack by 160% of EM, which is perfect for him, right? Because that's what his kit is about. He has EM skilling, and Dendro reactions all skill of EM as well. Okay, nothing new. All reactions skill of EM anyway. Now, the not that great thing about this weapon though is that the effect will be removed after 12 charge attacks or 10 seconds, whichever comes first. And this tireless hunt effect can only happen every 12 seconds, which basically means that because Tighnari's kit is also on a 12-second cooldown, you basically only get it buff for 12 charge attacks every 12 seconds. That's it. Which I know it sounds like a lot, but if you know how his kit works, his charge attack is multi-hit. So basically this only helps with like what, less than 2.5 of his actual aim shot. Actual fully charged with arrows. But that being said, its skilling is actually pretty good. Okay, against his EM 160% of it, this is like a base damage increase. Similar to how Red Horn works for Ito, for example. Okay. So obviously R5 is double, 24% all elemental damage bonus, 320% EM. These unfortunately remains the same. Okay. Wait, about that. Alright. So now that we talk about his ascension stat, we talk about his weapon. And I know most people will look at his attack and say that, oh, his attack is low, it's not good. But you gotta remember that he is not meant to be a high attack character because he has EM skilling involved. So what MiHoYo is trying to do here, or rather HoYoverse is trying to do here, is to make a character that you kind of need to invest in 4 different stats. At least 3 out of 4, with attack being the one that is not, that's kind of neglected. I'll talk more about that later. So let's talk about what's going to be happening in the video itself. I will obviously talk about his talents, his passive, his constellations, some conclusion on the constellations as well as a kit summary, important notes and suggestions, ER requirements and energy generation, his rotation in general, his damage and best artifact mean stats, the permutation. But bear in mind that all of this is obviously just solo first, because if I do the full team comp, the video will just be 1 hour. Okay, and I don't want it to be 1 hour. So we will divide and conquer. We will look only at his mainly his kit and just a sneak peek of rough view of how his performance is like as a solo character. Okay, and obviously I'll do a TLDR at the end of the video, and as well as the Tighnari video series what's coming next. So I have already talked about his signature weapon, his ascension stat. So let's talk about his talents. Now, first off, this is his normal attack talent. I'm only going to talk about the charge attack because he is a charge attack spamming character based on his kit. So only look at his charge attack. Now, similar to Ganyu, he has 2 levels of charging for his charge attack. And the second charge level fires off a whiff arrow that further creates 4 homing cluster bloom arrows. So this is sorry, sorry. This is the attack multiplier on his arrows. So if you look at it, right, total damage on per charge attack, basically you get 410.72% at level 9. And if you crown his NA talent, then it will be 434.88%. It's not too bad. It's not too bad. Because in terms of overall attack multipliers, he's lower than Ganyu if you include both hits of Ganyu charge attack. And why do I say this? Because some folks do not aim for charge. If some folks aims They aim Ganyu's charge attack on the floor in order to trigger the second effect, which is the AoE effect, right? So if you only consider the second hit, which is her AoE effect, then obviously Tighnari does more. But here's the thing: if you're going to be aiming and shooting your arrow accurately with Tighnari's with arrow, then you should be doing the same Ganyu, right? Okay, but Ganyu C6 does give you an additional cluster bloom arrow, the addition of the homing arrow. So now this is 476.34%, and at level 10 is 504.36%. So it's much higher than say Ganyu's second hit. But even if you consider both of Ganyu's hit together, once you consider both of Ganyu's charge attack together, right, both hits, Ganyu still does more than Tighnari. Okay, and I'm saying this as an objective comparison. I'm not a Ganyu sim. I'm not a Ganyu main. I'm a multiple character main. Okay, so in fact, if you have seen my Dendro elemental reactions video, you understand why his charge attack is split into multiple hits. I'm not going to talk more about that. I will put a link to the Dendro elemental reactions video, so do check that out, yeah? Okay, now let's talk about his elemental skill, which is by far, I'll say, the least important of his entire kit. But there's a very, very nice touch where his E creates a field that taunts opponent. Now the description is that it taunts opponents, but based on some of the leaks, it does look like it's a confusion, right? But effectively it taunts the opponents. Okay, whatever the case is, it's a nice little touch of CC. But damage wise, it's really very average for an E skill. You can even say that it's on the low side if you want to compare against some like really strong 5-star characters, like Yelan. But anyway, the most important thing about his E, other than the skill damage and the confusion that lasts for 8 seconds, or taunt that lasts, or the leader CC that lasts for 8 seconds, a few. Most important thing is that this E gives you an effect that decreases the with arrow charging time by 1.5 seconds for 3 with arrows or 12 seconds whichever comes first. So I think based on this you can already picture his rotation, right? After casting his E, you should be spamming your with arrows, which is his level 2 charge attack, quickly, and you'll be able to do so because all you need to do is to charge it only for 0.5 seconds, fire off, charge another 0.5 seconds, fire off. And this will give you multiple Dendro reactions because it's multiple hits. Even if the standard ICD is 3 hits, so every 3 hits you'll still be able to generate a reaction. So with his charge attack giving you so many hits, you are basically guaranteed 1 to 2 reactions every charge attack. Because it's 5 hits, right? Your first charge attack will definitely be 2 reactions because your very first hit will give you a reaction, then the next 4 attacks, the third of the 4th attack will trigger a reaction again. And that's why it's called a 3 hit rule. Alright, now let's talk about his Q next. Fashioner's Tangervine Shaft. I know a lot of people look at his multiplier, the base multiplier itself, and say that it's bad. But if you really look at it, right, it's 6 Tangervine Shafts at 94.55%, and if this first attack hits, you will trigger another 115.57% times 6. So we're talking about the 576.3, which hits, then you generate another 693.42%. And that's 1260.72% at level 9. This is actually a very high modifier for a 40 energy cost. Remember, it's 40 energy cost, it's 12 seconds cooldown. On a long rotation, like a 24-second rotation, you're effectively using this twice. 1260 times 2, that's 2.5k. So I don't know, I don't understand why people are saying that his Q is low, the attack by multiplier, because it's not. Okay, it's actually pretty high. It's a very high spammable Q. Think of it that way. Of course, obviously you need to set it up such that you're able to spam it. It's not difficult. Just put Cole in or Dendro Traveler as a battery. Build them out as a battery, right? You'll definitely be able to do it because it only has 40 energy cost required. So for level 12, it's higher. You have 1483.2%, and if you do it in a 24-second rotation, for example, then it's like almost 3,000, 2,900 percentage, more than 2,900, 2,960 plus %. Yeah, so it's pretty good on the multiplier. But more importantly, is that his kill is also designed to maximize triggering of Dendro reaction, seeing as he has 12 hits, right? 12 hits means that even if ICD, you get what? Four reactions. And we are talking about one burst. One burst give you 4 reactions. That's really good. And it's not like it's a prolonged sustained burst, right? It's a burst that you just fire, and then it triggers 2 rounds of attacks. Within those 2 round attacks, you get 4 reactions. That's actually really good. Okay. Alright, now let's go on to talk about the passives. Encyclopedic knowledge. This is very, very straightforward. It's just displaying the location of nearby resources you need to Sumeru on the minimaps. I'll say that this is actually good now, because Sumeru is new, right? Getting this on the very first 5-star when you have a new continent to explore is really nice. Now, Keen Sight, which is the next passive. After Tighnari fires a Rift Arrow, his elemental mastery is increased by 50 for 4 seconds. Now we know that if you watch my reaction video, you'll know that EM is actually the most important stat if you want to maximize your Dendro reactions. And Tighnari has a passive that automatically increases his EM. Now, I know people are going to complain, oh, this EM is so small, it's only 50. But look at the condition. It's so simple to achieve. Just fire his charge attack. So I'll say that this is definitely a good passive, and it's the more importantly, it synergizes with its next passive, which is the Scholarly Pride. For every point of elemental mastery that Tighnari possesses, his charge attack and Fashioner's Tangle Vine Shaft, which is the entire queue, as well as the charge attack, which are the 2 most important things, the 2 highest contributor in his kit. They get a scaling of 0.08% for 1 EM. Maximum damage bonus obtainable this way is 80%, which means 1000. So when you have 100 EM, you get 8% damage bonus. You have 1000 EM, you get 80% damage bonus, which is the max. So it's very important for characters, right? Especially a Dendro character, if you want to skill off you want to maximize their Dendro reactions. Not to mention the fact that him, you can see his signature weapon. His signature weapon is also give you increased charge attack based on his EM, right? So him having this EM skilling just make it such that he benefits from either high EM or hybrid EM build. So this is a very, very good and very important passive. So these are the passives. I have nothing to complain about for his passives really. And let's talk about his constellations, right? Now, C1, beginnings determine the roots. Basically, Tighnari's charge attack crit rate is increased by 15%. Flat increased by 15%. That's it. Very, very nice and straightforward. And this is very nice because he is a charge attack DPS. And this constellation, along with his high total attack multipliers, right, are the reasons why I feel he may be best built as a hybrid DPS. Hybrid in terms of like not full all-out CR/CD attack, but having like 400-500 EM as well. But we'll look at this comparison later and in future videos too, when we do the full team comp. C2, when there are opponents within his the field created by his E, Tighnari gains 20% Dendro damage bonus. This effect lasts up to 6 seconds if the duration ends. So in other words, right, as long as you have, or if no opponents, or if he no longer has opponents within it. So what this means is that you have an 8-second field. As long as there's opponent in it, you will get this 20% damage bonus. Once there are no opponents inside it, if the opponent leaves or the opponent dies, or they're removed, you get another 6 seconds on top of that. So theoretically, as long as you can keep mobs in there for 6 seconds, basically this is a permanent buff. Because his field lasts for 8 seconds, the cooldown is 12 seconds. As long as at the point of 6 seconds into the field duration, you start triggering this effect, or in between or earlier than that you trigger this effect but another opponent came into the field, you pull opponent in the field or you attract opponent in the field, whatever the case, you get extended again. So it's, from what I can see, this constellation is one where it's pretty easy to basically get a full uptime. Okay, and that's really good. Because for my future the com guides where you do the full rotation, right, I'm gonna assume that this thing lasts throughout. Makes my life easier math-wise. And this is really good because we are giving a utility to his E where his E is not exactly the best talent that he has, it's the worst talent that he has, but we will still use it for energy anyway. So having this added is nice. And again, it supports the whole hybrid DPS concept, right? Because the 20% Dendro damage bonus doesn't work for, say, the bloom related reactions, but it does work for the spray and aggravate. Yeah? And obviously it works for Tighnari's damage itself. On to C3. C3 basically increases the level of his Q by 3. And given that his Q is better than E, I think it makes sense for his for this to be C3. Now C4, when his Q is unleashed, the first hit of his Q is unleashed, all party members gain, or rather the moment you use his Q, all the party members gain 60 EM for 8 seconds. Now if the Q, any of the, when there's a fashioners placed in front here for the wording, right? It means that regardless of the first or second hit triggering a burning, bloom, aggravate, or spread reaction, their elemental mastery will be further increased by 16. So in other words, it's a total of 120 seconds. And the latter case will also refresh the buff state's duration, which means that basically on the second wave, if you trigger, it will also extend it by about 1 second, because that's how fast his 2 waves are anyway. 1 to 2 seconds. Okay. I know a lot of people complain that 120 EM is so pathetic. You have characters giving 200 EM like Kazuha or what do you call that? T6 is Diona, right? But you have to remember this is an extremely easy to fulfill condition. You set your team up correctly. Basically, the moment you use your key, you Q, you get 120 EM. And the most important thing, okay, you don't need to stay in the field. You don't need to stay in the field. Kazuha requires you to stay in the field. Diona requires you to stay inside her field as well. And that's actually very restrictive. If you have played Spiral Beast, you know, right? There are stages where the mobs are also. In fact, it's very common for the mobs to be very wide and far apart. So you can't fully utilize the on-field boost, except maybe in certain scenarios. But that's the problem, right? It's certain scenarios. But for this, you just use your Q, you spread out your team con rotation, set out your team con rotation correctly. For sure, you get 120 EM. So you cannot just look at the EM value. Yeah, you have to look at the condition. So I personally like this. Obviously, if the EM is higher, it's nice, but it's so easy to fulfill. It's awesome. It's better than trying to restrict yourself to a few. And for if you have C2 Kazuha and you have tried using the EM boost, right, you know that sometimes within Kazuha's skill, it's actually very hard to see. Assuming your graphics are turned on to the max, it's actually very hard to see the whatever else is going outside of his skill. Okay, but that's just a little sorry, a little pet peeve. But nevertheless, I'll say that this is a good constellation because it's 120 EM, give a whole party easy conditions. Yeah. Okay. Now C5. There's only one word I'll say for this. It's useless. It's literally useless because this doesn't increase the duration of the field or the it doesn't increase the duration of field. As simple as that. So it's useless. Because it doesn't skill according to his talent level, the duration, only the damage skills, and like I said, this is the smallest part of his entire kit. Let's talk about the most important one, C6. With arrows, charging time is decreased by 0.9 seconds and will produce one additional cluster bloom arrow upon hit. So what this means is that his whiff arrow is permanently decreased by 0.9 seconds. It's always 1.1 second charge time now. And effectively spam his whiff arrows. On top of that, you produce one additional cluster bloom, which is one additional homing, which again helps with the ICD, right? 3 hit rule. So now instead of producing 5 hits per charge attack, it's 6 hits per charge attack. Pretty much guaranteed 2 reactions per charge attack. So as long as the other conditions are fulfilled, like your catalyze or quicken is still there, your other elements are still there, for example. Okay, so you can see that it's very important to have constant off-field application from other elements for when you're using Tighnari. So I'll say that this is as OP as a C6 should be. Having CA charge time is so great for a CA DPS. Can you imagine having this for Ganyu? Effing crazy, I tell you. And adds on an additional cluster bloom, which means more damage, more reactions. So think of it this way, right? Every 1.1 second, he can now fire a Rift Arrow that has a total attack multiplier of 476.34% at level 9. Every 1.1 second. Even if Ganyu does higher damage, Ganyu needs 2 seconds, assuming you do have the C6 spamming, or after the C6 spamming, whatever the case is. But one thing to note, however, is that it really depends on how fast his rotation will be and how much on-field time he takes after the first 3 charge attacks after using his E. Right? Because he may not be able to fully utilize the 0.9 second reduction beyond the first 3. He has a 12 second cooldown on Q and E, right? Maybe he can take out the full duration if the off-field elemental from other characters lasts long enough. But I'll go into more detail on this when we do the comp guides. I'll really look at it in detail then, and we'll talk about this again. Okay? So, Constellations conclusion. His Constellations all look good on paper, except C5. And I'm not surprised, because this is very, very typical of a good 5-star with good Constellations, where only the C5 is bad. And more importantly, every X.0 version in Genshin should have a 5-star good Constellation so as to ensure sales before X.1. That's the Archon. It's a very easy selling strategy that obviously Hoyoverse follows. But we'll do the math to see if the Constellations are really good, because I know it all looks very useful, but we are talking about value here, right? So let's see how that goes. That will come in future. After I do all the comp videos, we'll do a proper Constellation comparison. We'll have time for that anyway, because you can only get really, the Constellation comparison really only matters once you're actually able to get more Constellations, right? So key summary, high Q multiplier, high CA multiplier in total, both in total. CC effect on his E, EM scaling on his passive, multiple hits on his Q and CA to overcome the standard ICT3 hit rule, Constellations all synergizing for what looks to be a hybrid build. What else is there to ask for? Maybe crit damage from his essential stat instead of Dendro damage. But I do suspect that Dendro damage is his essential stat to help with using EM Goblet, or at least justify using it. Obviously, I'll do a min-stat comparison later, but only for solo. It's more accurate when you have the full comp guide as well. So important notes and assumptions, I just want to quickly go through this, okay? For the first math guide, I'm only going to look at solo damage just to simplify things and to make the video shorter. We're already 22 minutes in here. Signature weapon and the new artifact set, Deepwood Memories, will be used here. Now, I personally think that Deepwood Memories is much better for Tighnari than the other set, although it's still usable for him. Because of this, the 4-piece effect, 30% Dendro resistance shred upon using his elemental Q or elemental burst or skill, so either his E or Q. And Dendro resistance shred is all the more important because Dendro cannot interact with animal, which means that 4-piece VV resistance shred cannot work for Dendro. So if you're using a Dendro main like Tighnari, you have to use Deepwood Memories. That's my opinion. Because that 30% Dendro resistance strength is also all the more so important. Okay? Now, Tighnari is assumed to have standard ICD across all his attacks, even though bow charge attack default is no IC. For bow charge attack, right, there's actually quite a lot of exceptions. Yelan, Amber, Venti, Diona, although some of them don't really use charge attack as their kit per se. But yeah, I'm just trying to highlight that even though both CA default is no ICD, there are so many precedence cases where there are. So I'm going to assume that Tighnari has. In fact, if you saw my previous video, I already mentioned that there is a leak that shows that he does have ICD on his charge attacks. Okay. Okay, one important thing here, I'm assuming that catalyzed duration, I actually talked about this in my previous video. I'm assuming that catalyzed here, in terms of duration, is assumed to be similar to superconduct, where once you trigger it, it lasts for that set amount seconds, 7 seconds, rather than like EC, where EC is there's a duration on it, but it does gets consumed or shortened when you trigger further reactions. Yeah. And what we're going to do with catalyze, we are obviously going to trigger spread, right, and aggravate if you set out your thing accordingly. Okay, so I'll just assume that it's similar to superconduct here. Let's talk about its energy generation. Tighnari's E gives you 3 particles with a 50% chance for 4th particle. Also that is actually pretty good for 40 energy burst character. I mean, for perspective, Yelan with 80 energy burst is 3 on press, 4 on hold. So yeah, I'll say that it's pretty good. I'll go more into this when we go into rotation, but with Coley in team, he should only need an ER. But when I talk about stats later, you'll see that we're still trying to get ourselves a little bit of ER, like 11 ER or 16 ER, depending on what is the main stat artifact that we use, yeah? Okay, now, talking about Tighnari's rotation in general, I'll expect that it's a very typical rotation where other characters, they set up their off-field sustain elemental application setup, be it Yamiko or Kole or Yelan or Shinobu Cookie, yeah, more or less the same on that aspect. Once you set all of those up, use his E, because his E is the lowest damage contributor, right? So we're gonna use his E to set up a lot of stuff. We're gonna use his E to get our C2 effect if we have C2. We're gonna use his E to trigger the 4-piece Deadwood Memories effect, because it's a waste to use it on your Q. You should have your 4-piece effect ready before using your Q. Likewise for the C2 effect. So E, Q, and then your charge attacks. Then you repeat. That's really how simple in general his rotation is. But obviously it's not it's never simple. Once I go into more details on the rotation and the comps, etc., then we'll see how the full comp will work out. How much his on-field time will be, yeah? So we have Tighnari damage and the best artifact stats here. And before I go into those, right, I just want to quickly look at the different artifact presentation and the stats used in the math so that you guys understand where I'm coming from. Okay, let's see. Okay, so these are the artifacts. So I think it's pretty straightforward to understand, right? You have the R1, R5 in a pair. So here you have a attack sense with a EM goblet and a crit damage circlet. Next permutation we have EM sense, EM goblet, crit damage circlet. You basically for circlet it will always be crit damage because you're using. I'm assuming that the signature weapon is used here. So you have high CR, you should go for high crit damage circlet. Okay. And then you have the next penetration, which is EM sense with a Dendro damage goblet along with a crit damage circlet. And following that, then you have the cookie cutter build or the typical DPS build, attack, elemental, and crit damage circlet. Okay. Now one important thing is not going to be easy to farm for Dendro goblet on release, right? So all the more there's value in looking at EM as a goblet. Okay. This is the base rows. These have already considered what are the type of base row that we want. I mean, obviously on the attack sense, you are going to want CR, CD, EM, ER, right? On the EM goblet, you're going to look for attack, CR, CD, ER. Okay, so pretty straightforward. But I'll just mention it here, and the figures are here as well, so you can see. So this is the stats that we are going for. Going 65 CR, 250 crit damage. Obviously, it's not a harm if you go higher CR, but personally, with 65 CR plus 15 CR from C1, if you're getting C1, I would say it's a pretty comfortable CR zone. Get the crit damage up. This is the attack. Obviously, when you use when you're not using any attack sense, the attack value is kind of low. Okay. Now, more importantly, is the EM. Look at this EM here. Okay, this is the total EM. This is EM from artifacts, including the main stat as well as the base row, like having like 20 EM on just one of your attack sense, for example. But all the upgrades, all the upgrades going to other stats. And then you have the A4 passive, so that gives you your 317, your 4A4, and the 150 in the worst case scenario where you go full attack build. Okay, now with C4 effect, obviously we add 920 to that. So very simple, and you have the weapon effect here as well. This is the ER that we get. Okay, and all the different damage sources, yeah. Okay, so I hope this is clear what kind of permutation we are looking at here. Now let's go on to back to the damage itself, the damage figures. Ooh, Okay, I know it's a long, quite a lot of figures, but I'll quickly explain this. Yeah. So first off, this whole bunch of figures here is before you include spread. No reaction damage, just purely Tighnari's damage. Now the yellow highlights show you the best result, the highest result for each permutation. So at C0, EM Dendro crit damage goblet, or rather crit damage permutation is the best until you go C4. Once you go C4, the typical attributes have to be better. But this is without reactions. So we should look at the ones with reactions, which is the green ones. Okay. Now reactions here, I've already factored in standard ICD, and we should get 7 spreads in 5 seconds. Assuming that catalyze is being set up by Kole, not Tighnari. Okay. So you see that the result is a bit varied. You have C0, C1 with EM Dendro, crit damage goblet being the best. Now again, remember this is solo. Okay, remember this is solo. I need to emphasize this because if you're going to get party members in your team giving you EM, right, there will come a point where EM may fall off. And then something like this permutation might be better. Right? I mean, I can't rule out the possibility of that. That's why I keep stressing that this is solo figures. It may change when we go to the full comp. But at the very least, you see here, now I know that this is only R5 because I just did a simple conditional rule. But when the R5 of this permutation is better than all the other R5s, you can rest assured that the R1 will also be better than the rest of the R1s. Okay? So basically, once you include the reactions, it's a mix between double EM crit damage versus EM Dendro crit damage permutation in terms of which is the best. C2, C4, C5. You actually have double EM being the best. But here's the thing, look at the difference between them. Generally speaking, there's not much difference between them. Although I would say that in terms of potential, not potential, but generally speaking, EM Dendro crit damage circle is slightly better. This is 4 out of 3. 4 versus 3 out of 7. 7 different constellation levels. But it's hard to get Dendro, right? At the beginning. So you could use a EM offset goblet initially before we get that Dendro goblet. I hope this gives you guys a good enough view. But again, this is solo. Let's see if the results vary in the next video, yeah? So honestly, without going to the rotation itself, it's actually very hard for me to say whether Tighnari will spend more than 5 seconds on field. But 5 seconds is minimum, I would say, to fire off your 3 reduced charging time charge attacks, right? So that's why I only look at 5 seconds here. So to be fair, right, we are looking at his biggest surge in damage because it's the first 5 seconds. So it's pretty decent. You have 334k on C6 in 5 seconds. You have 210k on C0 in 5 seconds. We're talking about like what? 40k and 60 plus k per second. So that's actually pretty good DPS. But if you spend more than 5 seconds on Tighnari, the comparison values will differ greatly. That's number one. Number two, okay, maybe not greatly, but it will definitely differ. And the next thing is the signature weapon effect. Because the signature weapon effect, remember, it only lasts for 12 charge attacks. So if your Tighnari spends more than 5 seconds, he's firing more charge attacks without the signature weapon buff, the effect of your EM is going to fall off. Right? Because your EM is no longer increasing your charge attack damage based on the weapon's effect. That's why I say that the comparison will change then. But I really cannot say whether he will spend more than 5 seconds without really looking at the rotation in detail. And you guys, if you have seen my math guides, you know how detailed I go into the rotation. Yeah. So let's see how that goes eventually. I'll say is pretty close between EM Dendro crit damage and EM crit damage. But I just put EM Dendro crit damage just as the best because of it having 4 out of 7 versus 3 out of 7. So it's all very, very close. Okay, but one most important thing to remember is that double EM crit damage will fall off if Tighnari fires more than 3 charge attacks. This is also one other reason why I say that the EM Dendro crit damage is probably your better choice, even though they are very close. Cause the moment you fire off more than 3 charge attacks, this will definitely fall off. And no worries, if we really do fire off more than 3, you will see me updating the math accordingly in the future videos. Okay? Okay, we are almost at the TLDR. So let me repeat this again because I know people skip the video here and there. I need to keep stressing this, okay? These are solo figures. I have not included buffs from team members, especially EM buffs. EM buffs may give you enough EM for Tighnari to drop the EM instead. For example, you know, having a C4 Collet and giving her a allergy for the end, for example. That's 160 EM boost just from her. Without having to stay in the field. I need to stress this, without having to stay in the field. And by the way, it's not a coincidence that the the four main characters that give you EM. No, let me make it 5, okay? 5 characters that I can think of right now that give EM to the whole party. None of them react with Dendro. You have 3 anymore, okay? Kazuha, C2 Kazuha, Sucrose, and Hazel, giving you a small amount of EM as well. Those 3 characters, they do not react with Dendro. Next, you have Cryo, C6 Diona. Cryo doesn't react. You have Albedo, 125 EM if you're only, and again, doesn't react with Dendro. So do you see? It's not a coincidence. I can tell you guys it's not a coincidence that these elements do not react with Dendro. Okay? It's not. It's intentional. That's why Dendro reactions are a 2-step process in order to make it look like they are giving you a lot of new reactions, right? Because you have catalyze, quicken, spread, aggravate, so that's what, like 3. And then you have bloom, hyper bloom, and burgeon, so that's like another 6 reactions. Wow, so much new reactions. But there's actually only 3 other elements that actually interact with Dendro. Yeah, a little bit of food for thought. Okay, but most important thing I want to say here is please wait for the com guides to decide the best artifact. It means that build the solo figures are just to give you a rough idea first. Okay, with buff in, they may vary slightly. Alright. Okay, now let's talk about the TLDR. I'm gonna go fast here because the video is already 37 minutes long, yeah? Tighnari's kit is designed to optimize Dendro reactions, going as far as to trigger 7 spreads in 5 seconds or 10 spreads in 5 seconds at C6, assuming standard ICD across, and whatever element you need is all there through your other characters. Okay? That's of consistency. Setup. Now, dishing out 210k on C0 in 5 seconds and 334k on C6 in 5 seconds is a great surge in DPS and gives them a pretty or very good performance, especially for a solo figure. However, it remains to be seen when we go into actual rotation whether he needs to take up more time. His DPS will for sure drop if he needs more than 5 seconds, since like I said, the first 5 seconds is the largest surge in DPS, spamming all your talents and also the way Hunter's Path works. So you kind of see that, let's say if you don't have, if he really works as a 5 seconds on-field character, right? It's going to be like a quick swap high burst DPS character, which is still good. But while his damage is high, his single target only. So that's actually a huge disadvantage if compared to someone like Gang Yu who's also charged at DPS but with AoE. Now, if you only care about meta and not enjoying the new Dendro element with a Dendro main, I honestly think that Gang Yu will probably be the safer option, especially if you're trying to save for Kusanali. Especially if you're an F2P player, you're trying to save for Kusanali. Then I cannot possibly ask you to go pull for Tighnari. Because it's, to be honest, it's safer to save for Kusanali. But a huge however here in caps, we will need to see the full configures to see the result is the same. Especially if his on-field time is in more than 5 seconds and you have C6, maybe his C6 will make it such that he basically has a much higher single target DPS than Gan Yu. If that's the case, then there may be some justification in pulling for him. But if you're looking for a high DPS with AoE, then obviously Gan Yu fits the build. Now I know a lot of people say that Gan Yu falls off. Not for Miao Gan Yu actually. Miao Gan Yu is still doing very well if you set her up correctly. Okay, and with burning coming over over the horizon, maybe much easier to set up her build. So That's that as well. Now, lastly, although I talk about how his Constellation looks good paper-wise, right? Right now, value-wise, after doing the math, it's actually not looking good. I mean, just look at this, right? 210k and 334k. How much of an increase is that? It's less than 100%. I don't think it's even 80% yet. Yeah, it's not 80% yet. I have not done the actual comparison, so I'm just doing it in my mind. But yeah, it's not even 80% Constellation boost. But I don't want to conclude just based on solo figures. We'll do a proper comparison after we have all the comps, etc. And also, if it spends more than 5 seconds on field, obviously the C6 gets significantly better in terms of relative comparison, even if its overall DPS kind of averages out or tapers off. Okay. Now, lastly, I'll repeat this again and again in this video. This is all based on solo figures. Once we go into comp guides, the results may vary. Maybe he'll do higher damage against Ganyu for single target, but worse off for multiple. But to be honest, I don't see him reaching Yelan's level of single target damage, especially C6 versus C6. But to be fair, Yelan is crazy broken at C6 with her single target burst level. There's no character that does as much damage in the same time frame. That 5 C6 charge attacks, okay? That are fired off as normal attacks. Well, let's see how that goes. Give me a bit more time. Let me churn out, do out all the math, do out the math guys. And it's not just about math, right? It's really considering and planning out the rotations as well. Yeah, that's why my videos take time. And I apologize for that, for the wait. Okay, so Tighnari video series was coming next. We have done the Tighnari math guide. We have introduced you guys to the kid. We take a look at his solo damage. So obviously I'm going to talk about team coin rotations next for the next few videos. And there's a lot of options involved, right? You have the spread aggravate build, you have the bloom, all the different type of bloom builds. Because with his low attack, right? If you are using EM sense, Banner's buff actually feels a lot better. But the problem with Banner's buff is it is what I've seen a leak where when you use Banner, right? Basically you create burning, and with burning, right, kind of interferes with catalyze as far as I can tell. So that's kind of bad, but well, we wouldn't know exactly how it works until we actually get it. But I'll definitely put Banner in mind with in the team comp, because right now I am looking at double electro, double dendro, or electro hydro dendro, double dendro. Maybe a electro plus Banner pyro plus double dendro may be good. But I see some challenges with regards to, like, overload causing knockback without any pull, any characters doing pull, and you also have the fact that burning may cause an issue with regards to catalyze. Yeah, and obviously we do artifact comparison. He does have quite a few options like Wanderers, the other artifact set, things called Gilded Dreams. We'll do weapon comparison and specific weapon math as well, and we'll do Constellation and Refinement comparison. Oh, one thing I want to say is it's R1 to R5 is his R1 to R5 is quite standard. Okay, sorry, wrongly. His R1 to R5 is pretty standard, but never mind. We will go into the actual comparison when we have a lot more math cards done for him, so that it'll be more accurate. Yeah. So let me know in comments if there are any specific math you would like, and I'll see if it can be done. I know that people are asking for some remath on Yae Miko with EM, and I'm kind of interested in that as well, but we will have to cover the new characters first, and so many new characters. I have it headache just thinking about the number of math cards I have to do. Okay. But yeah, I'll try my best to see what can be done. Yeah. So thanks everyone for watching, for spending your time on this video. I hope it helps. Thanks for if you like the content, remember to like the video and click subscribe for more. Bye.